Well, hey team, Grant Hagen here with DroneDeploy. Welcome into Reality Capture Live. We are super excited that you guys are joined in with us here for our inaugural episode, whatever we're calling this. We are just really excited that you guys are here. Thank you for tuning in. We hope that you guys find these very useful and helpful in your journey in reality capture, and thank you for letting us be a part of it. So we have a lot of fun stuff that we're going to cover and really dive into today. And really what we wanted to kind of do was really give you guys an idea of what it is that today is going to talk about. And so we are really excited to put in front of you a really fun topic that we get asked a lot, which is just trends in reality capture. What does this mean? How does this all turn into being useful and helpful for me in the role that I'm doing? And so we have an amazing guest slated in here of Jono, who is one of the co-founders here at DroneDeploy. But we think you guys are going to be really encouraged by this conversation. Jono is just an incredible resource, not only to our team, but to so many people in the industry of reality capture. So we're going to introduce him and bring him into this conversation. So we hope you guys find this really fun and exciting. Let's dive into a little bit of how you guys can join this conversation. So Reality Capture Live, the intention here is to really bring and engage you guys as a part of this conversation. And so we have some really fun ways that we're going to do that. We'll allude to those here in a little bit, but we really want you to join the conversation. And we have some really kind of fun ways of going about doing that. But please do join in with us. It's really fun to hear and engage with the questions that you guys have and to really hear what it is that you're interested in wanting to learn. And so what we want to do is really talk about why Reality Capture Live. Like, why did we even decide to do this? What you guys can expect and how can you engage with us? And really the idea of Reality Capture Live bred from one of our core values here at DroneDeploy, and that is simplify. So if you saw the trailer, if you tuned in to kind of how this thing really started, we really want to find more ways to help bring simplification to reality capture. It's one of our core values at DroneDeploy. We think it is really meaningful to this topic that we're involved with in reality capture. And so really that is the heart. That's the goal of what we're trying to do here, is to really help simplify this topic. It can be really confusing and I think it can be really overwhelming at times. And so that is really our purpose of wanting to do this, is to really help simplify this idea of reality capture. And so what can you expect? You can expect some amazing people to be a part of these conversations. We have a really fun, just episodes that we've really slated in to bring people as a part of this conversation. Today, you see up in that top left, Jono. He is an amazing resource that you guys are going to hear from. Next week, we have some really fun things going on with Adam Karp, who's in our team for solutions engineering, Jay, who runs that team as well, up in that top right, and just some more friends. And so what you can expect is really just industry experts. That's the idea here, is really connecting you not only just to our team and our staff, but also industry experts that are out working at the companies that you guys work along with every day. And so that's what you can expect. Really some great folks to come as a part of these conversations and really to engage and really introduce you to some of these individuals. It's really fun when you get to broaden your network and really share some of the best folks that you have known over time, or really industry experts that you've been most impacted by. And so that is what you can expect, is just real expert folks that are here to answer your guys' questions. And really the last question is, how can you engage with us? The first thing first is really add a comment, drop a note into this session down below. We love seeing those comments. I got a running list down here, which is just really fun to see. And then we have a really fun idea that we're going to try to do here in the coming weeks, is really just to have your questions submitted. And so we'll talk a little bit about this at the end. We'll obviously discuss the topic that we're going to hit on in a couple weeks. That's kind of the idea. We're going to do these every couple weeks. And so we hope you guys can jump in when you're interested in a topic, tune into some of the sound bites that we'll produce after this as well. But we have a really kind of fun way to capture your guys' questions that we'll hit on towards the end of this live stream. And so first things first, I wanted to sprint through the intro here because I want to bring Jono into the conversation. This is just really fun. Jono, thank you for joining in with us on the inaugural episode of Reality Capture Live. Thanks so much, man.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Great to be here. We're excited.
Yeah, this is really exciting. One, because I really drug Jono in here and said, hey, man, you are an expert on this topic. Let's continue to bring some more fun into these conversations. And he willingly said yes. Of course, it sounds like an amazing thing. But what I wanted to do, Jono, is I don't think you've been on a live stream yet. And so one, welcome to the fun. This is what we love doing here on the DroneDeploy team. But two, would love a little background. I know some folks that you've gotten to connect with on LinkedIn may know your background and may not. I love hearing the story of kind of how DroneDeploy started, and would love for you to kind of hit on some of that too.
Yeah, of course. Wow, where to begin? So, three of us started the company: Mike, Nick, and myself. Nick and I, we have been working on problems in computer science and programming since I think the year 2000. So it's 23 years now that we've been good friends and hacking on different software and math problems together. And we met in high school, sitting in the computer labs with an interest in computer science. And then the three of us were all in undergrad together in South Africa. Mike was my next door neighbor. And we had a passion for science, for technology, and for building businesses. And so the three of us started our first business idea together in 2005, I think. So that's a whole host of years of working together on interesting problems. I think we've done about 7 or 8 different startup ideas over that time period. We're still friends. We still hang out on weekends, and it's been 10 years of us working together at DroneDeploy.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy. It's crazy that the
yeah,
10-year mark was this year, and really just celebrating that. We had our kind of all company meeting here a few months back, and just to hear you guys' story of where things started, obviously the acquisitions along the way with other kind of parallel tracks of things that you guys were really interested in doing, and yeah, just here we are kind of today, and talking about this idea of reality capture. I kind of am curious. So obviously, DroneDeploy kind of started in the drone space, which kind of shows to our name a little bit more, but kind of tell me a little bit about the journey that it's been, even just in these last couple years of transitioning maybe from just kind of an aerial tool to now, obviously, there's a lot of ground applications, robotic applications that we've started to kind of get involved with too.
yeah, sure. I mean, at the beginning, the whole company started. Nick and I were both doing our PhDs in machine learning. Mike had a real job at a bank and had money to start hobbies. And he got into remote control helicopters as his fun hobby. And he would share his leftover bits with Nick and I. We'd fix them up and fly them ourselves. And when we got confident, we would literally duct tape point and shoot cameras before we had smartphone cameras onto the front of these helicopters. We'd fly them around and we'd try and get these interesting pictures from the sky. Because it used to be a manned helicopter or airplane or something coming from an airport all the way just to get a couple of pictures from the sky. And so this was a really interesting perspective. This is in about 2009 when we started doing this. We got into it from just the hobbyist side of just flying drones, but all the businesses we were building on the back end were all kind of B2B businesses focused on hard technology problems and how to drive efficiencies in business. And it was actually through a kind of side project experiment of trying to work with anti-poaching in South Africa, where we looked at uh, applying fixed wing drones for monitoring this Kruger National Park, which is this huge area of land, but it only had about 400 game ranges.
Hmm.
And we bumped into a couple of challenges in the early days of just it being really hard to get the drone to do what you wanted it to do. It was all kind of research grade command line parameters that you're playing with. And then the data that came out at the other end back then, state of the art, was a GoPro duct taped onto the front, and you'd get like an hour of video. You'd have to rewatch it and fast forward, rewind to try and find something interesting in there. And so that kind of planted the seeds of how do we make these drones really easy to control and collect data, and then how do we make sense of the data on the tail end. And in particular, trying to answer problems like questions like what's going on in this certain area that I care about with the video that was very painful. And then also saying, I know that I see something interesting in this digital representation, but how do I send somebody out in the field to that location?
Hmm.
And so that's kind of where we got the idea of making maps and 3D models as being this really important, valuable piece of information. And we started from the drone side because that was the hardest data and technology to work with. You know, flying is just inherently very expensive. You have to have enough infrastructure and size and mass and technology to lift people. And then as soon as you're lifting people, it has to be really safe. They have to be highly trained, and all this stuff just makes it really complicated and expensive. And so we saw this opportunity of, at the time, we called it cheap labor in the sky, where we could use these little flying robots to go and do incredible work. And delivery we saw was kind of interesting, but like the real value add that we saw from the early days stemmed from those duct taped point and shoot cameras, where we were like, understanding the real world is incredibly important. And for so many industries where there are these huge complicated physical processes, they don't have the luxuries that we tend to have as technology companies, where we have like PagerDuties and Datadogs and all these like sensors that are telling us what's going on with all our infrastructure, how many people are using the product, where they're getting stuck. We have all of these signals digitally, but in construction, mining, agriculture, energy, all these industries, they don't have that same level of telemetry.
Yeah.
And so applying all those kind of problems and perspectives together, that's what kicked off DroneDeploy in the early days of using drones to take photographs, build 3D models and maps to help manage and monitor change in these large physical spaces.
Yeah, it's crazy. There's some fun little notes in there too that I've heard through, a ton of other stories that you guys have given, and it's really crazy too. Just this convergence of like opportunity and idea that you guys had, and obviously then the technology becoming more and more of a thing, and companies like DJI that were coming out with easier to fly objects that definitely made it more than just hoping that it didn't crash. And so I love hearing that story because one, it just kind of helps set up a little framework of like, hey, a lot of people have different routes into reality capture. And that's what's really exciting about it. And even hearing what you're talking about of just it impacts so many different industries from so many different spectrums of the built world versus a digital world. It's really cool. And I think that's what makes it such an exciting topic to talk about, but also an overwhelming topic that we could even, dive into some of those specifics too. But I want to get into your kind of opinion around this idea of how do you define reality capture? So I'm going to kind of flip to a slide here because this is something that I think is often challenged by folks when they get into this topic of like, hey, where do you even begin? Like, how do you start to kind of address this idea of defining it? And so I have a definition on the next page, kind of spoiler alert, but like, I'm curious to kind of hear from you, like what are ways in which you were kind of helping describe it to folks in the early days of like, hey, what's your guys' kind of goal in capturing reality?
Yeah. From my perspective, the customers that we work with are the companies that are making the physical world possible for us. Like it's what's driving civilization. Everything that we work with, that we interact with, that we live under, that we drive on, all this stuff either came from a mine or from a farm. It was transported through our transportation network to some kind of factory or construction site where it was put together. And then it's operated and maintained and energized through the power infrastructure. And so all of this like physical stuff that makes society possible, those are the customers that we serve. And they have these very complicated physical processes that are just difficult to manage in general. And so when I think of like what is reality capture, it is using technology to create these digital snapshots of what the world was at different points in time and understand what the changes are that are happening across those points in time, try and derive some insights in order to manage those processes better and drive efficiency.
Yeah, I think the challenging part too, it's a much better way of approaching it maybe than, than I would have. But what's funny about it is like, it's a part of a bigger narrative, right? Because you kind of mentioned like the analysis component of it's not just a single snapshot in time. There's obviously, a modeling component of what a built or a digital world representation maybe that you're comparing it to. And so, it's really interesting to kind of the challenge of this topic, because it is so broad, is that it really impacts the kind of these two first components, right? Which is hardware and software. You have to obviously capture it with some kind of form of hardware, whether that's from the ground or from the air. And then obviously you're capturing and doing something with that in the software kind of component of processing it. And so I did find a definition, one, because there's plenty of them out there. But if you guys haven't heard of Mappingscaping, they are a podcast. Go check them out. So thank you guys for providing this great definition. But I really liked it, one, because I think it just does a really good job of like simplifying, again, what it is that it can be defined by. And I love how they kind of talk about it is a little bit of specialized equipment. Obviously, flying aerial objects and drones is a little bit of a specialization. There's a lot of ground applications as well that are specialized. But equipment and software, which is, I think, an important thing to note here, is that it's both the hardware and software component. A lot of other reality capture tools and platforms may solve both of those at the same time. We obviously kind of approach it more from the software side of it. But really, to your point, Jono, here is this kind of last point can be used to create, 3D models and maps and visualizations that, can accurately show kind of object. Any kind of thoughts to this definition? And plenty of them out there. I just found this one to kind of, again, simplify kind of what we're trying to kind of define it as.
Yeah, sure. I think the two things that I'd adjust on this, the one is that it's not just like the 3D models and the maps. When you're talking about reality capture, we're working with thermal imagery, we're working with multispectral, we've got like gas sensors like methane and hydrogen sulfide sensors. So it runs the gamut of like these 1D point sensors of what is the value at this location, through to the 2D sensors like photographs in RGB and thermal, all the way up to 3D as well in terms of things like point clouds. And so you have lots of different dimensionality in terms of the data you're collecting, and it obviously requires some kind of specialized equipment. So I definitely agree with that. And I think like when we look at it, we tend to think of the world as all being quite GIS focused as well, of having location attached to all of these things, because that's what helps give you scale perspective. It's like what's going on at a specific place.
And give me some GIS. Anytime I feel like we're going to have an acronym thrown out here, I got to make sure to insert. I almost need like an air horn. It's like, what does GIS stand for? I know you know it. I'm just putting you on the spot a little bit for folks again that are like, hey, I've heard it, but maybe I don't really even know what that means. Give me an acronym there.
So GIS is Geographical Information Systems, and so this is like where we're looking at information in data, and we're putting location on that data. And so how do you work with that data, both in terms of like capturing it, storing it, but then also analyzing it in a perspective where you have location. Gotcha. So if you're looking for something like change over time, either you need to exactly capture exactly the same picture from exactly the same spot with exactly the same viewpoint every single time, or you need to have that data processed in a way where you can align it using that geographic perspective. And so when you start to think of like trending and change over time and detection and all those other things, like having that location is very important.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so this is really where we start to kind of test our live capabilities here. And so we're going to be using a tool, Mentimeter. If you guys have seen it in some other kind of presentations, would encourage you guys to hop in as a part of this conversation. Really, I'm curious to hear from the audience. We have some folks that are tuning in on the chat down here in LinkedIn, but I'm going to flip over to kind of this page that we're going to share here of really just like what words come to mind from your guys' perspective out in the audience. Like I'm curious. I think this is a word cloud for this first question. So you just basically type in your response, and then we kind of see it aggregated on kind of this word cloud, if we call it that. So I'm going to flip over my screen here to make sure that I can show that. And let's see and make sure that some of the responses are coming in here. And so I probably should hold up my menti.com. That's the spot to go. And then 67230851. And so I'm going to actually pull up that QR code and let folks kind of jump back into that as well here. So yeah, because I think what we're really curious to hear is, just like what your guys' kind of thoughts around how you guys define reality capture, right? And so here, let me throw that back up here. If you're at your computer, grab your phone, scan that little QR code to kind of get an idea of what that looks like. But and I think maybe I'm curious while we get some responses in, Jono, like what are resources that you've kind of gone to help kind of stay up to date on like definitions, how people are defining it, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah. I think with any kind of learning, there are two approaches. You can either try and find what is the body of work and move your way through it, or you can say, I've got this challenge or this problem, and then I'm just going to get stuck in and I'm going to try and find whatever the best information is to kind of unblock me at the next step. So I definitely tend to be the latter rather than like saying, I'm going to study everything and then try and do something. I tend to try and just do it. And then as you bump into issues, go and learn stuff. And so from that perspective, I mean, there are a ton of amazing, obviously, like books and textbooks, but so much of where I've learned things is just blog posts. The Department of Transportations actually have some amazing content where they're using it as like educational tools to train up their employees, particularly in like GIS and coordinate systems and things like that. Specific shout out to the Texas Department of Transportation. They got some amazing content.
That's awesome.
I'm also like a big YouTube person as well. So, somebody's gone on YouTube and put something together.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
yeah.
I love these. I know you can maybe see them a little bit on your screen. They're a little bigger on my little side screen over here. But yeah, it's interesting. I agree with a lot of these words. One, I love the Matrix. I love when we do these because there's always really funny responses. So thank you for the folks that are filling this out and kind of adding them too. But it's interesting. There's a lot of words that are coming in here too that I don't think get talked about a lot. I'm curious on the character creation. That's an interesting one of like things that come to mind too. Let me pull up and kind of see some of the trackability, instruction site, virtual tours, uh, innovative, character creation, history, uh, details and view, virtual tours. Yeah. And this is what's really interesting because I think oftentimes why I love doing these is you kind of get a mix between this idea of like hardware, software, which is kind of what we talked about a little bit, right? But also like uh, goals or also pain points, which is also kind of a really helpful thing too, because it's like, hey, we should probably think of our problem statement of what reality capture is trying to solve. Any on here that stand out? I know they're probably a little small on your end from what you're seeing, but any of them stand out to you?
I think, we're obviously looking at this from the industrial perspective. When I see character creation and things like that, that's like the motion capture for movies and video games. And,
Yeah,
there's this whole other dimensionality to reality capture that we probably don't work with and think about a huge amount. But from the industrial perspective, I see a lot of like innovation, innovative, and I think over the last couple of years, it really has been those innovation teams that have been pushing the boundaries on what we can do to digitize the physical world. VR, virtual tour, AR, definitely there's this like bridge of the taking the physical world, digitizing it, and then being able to re-engage with it from this digital perspective. And you can then enrich that digital view with a whole bunch of additional context and information and insights. And I think we will start to see more of that in time. It's still very fringe, but there's opportunity for sure.
totally. Uh,
Efficiency, that's like my number one word.
which one?
Uh, Efficiency.
Efficient. Yeah, yeah, totally.
Of
All right, I'm
course,
gonna go to
we
the
use
next question here, which is really its impact, because this is what's really fascinating too. I think so. Again, if you're following along with us, go ahead and transition over to this next question there on your phone or on the computer that you're adding in here. But this is what I'm really curious to kind of get from the audience as well. Is like, are you seeing its impact on the industry that you're in? So obviously the folks that are tuning in here coming from all different sorts of industries. And so a couple things. One, the line that you see there obviously is going to give you the average. And so the first person here clearly saying it is strongly impacting the industry that they're in. But as we kind of talk about this too, Jono, like maybe walk me through a little bit of just your perspective of seeing its impact, right? So what's maybe kind of surprised you the most in the impact that it's had, and just kind of allude to some of those things.
Yeah, I think a phrase that we always used to say in the early days, and I guess continue to say now, is a quote by Peter Drucker, and it's "You can't manage what you can't measure." And what reality capture is doing is providing this measurement to all these physical spaces and physical industries that enable them to manage this a lot better. And so the biggest impact that I see is you're kind of taking what's oftentimes subjective. It's a person goes out there, they see what they see in the world, they pay attention to the things that they care about, and they write it down in their notebook, capturing what they think is important at the time. Reality capture gives you this ability to take this awesome snapshot. And a customer phrased this to me a while ago where they said, "It helps me answer questions that I didn't know I had at the time."
Mm,
And I love that. Like it's taking that subjectivity out. It's giving you this like objective, true. This is what it was at that point in time lens. And by capturing all this extra additional information and context, you can get totally fresh perspectives.
yeah, totally. Uh, I've heard that quote so many times, and it's used in probably so many business practices, but it's true, right? I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
really what's interesting about it is it really does give you the insights to be able to really be able to measure from, which we're going to get into here in a little bit. So I don't want to overlook our topic that we talked about, which was really the trends, right? But I think even to get to that point, it's helpful to help define and kind of get some engagement of some of the impact that it's having too. But I'm really curious. Let me transition my slide here and pull this back up. Uh, let's get into it. Like, what are the trends that you're seeing in reality capture? Obviously, we've been around for a little bit. We've seen it from both the ground and the aerial perspective. Like, what are the things that come to mind for you as you're starting to kind of see, hey, like the next, let's just call it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, like what are the things that are standing out to you that you're also hearing from customers and that we're also trying to kind of help support as well?
Yeah, I think one trend that we've seen throughout history and will continue to happen in the future is as consumer technology increases in complexity, there are all these amazing follow-on effects that then bleed into industry. Uh, Technology is expensive because when you're building small numbers of anything. So when you think of handheld cameras, they used to be really expensive things to have. GPS devices used to be really expensive. Accelerometers used to be expensive. Then smartphones came out, and with this insane production rate on things like iPhones, we now have incredibly cheap mobile cameras with accelerometers, with GPS. All this incredible technology is just proliferated. That's what led into drones and made drones really cheap and accessible. And DJI capitalized on that, and others are doing so now. But that opened up the skies. The same kind of thing started to happen on the ground as well. Um, Fast forwarding a little bit further, self-driving cars, that huge momentum that exploded a couple of years ago, has made lidar sensors so much cheaper. And
Mhm.
so we're starting to see many more cheaper mobile scanners come out where as we're just producing more and more lidar, it's driving the cost down there. So we're going to start to see that whole world open up. Yeah, I mean, that trend in general is going to drive the hardware side. And then as we get more hardware, we unlock new capabilities from the software perspective. In the perspective of industry trends, I think looking back over the last little while and looking through to the end of this year, there are kind of three things that we see happening, and we validated this with customers. And this is also what's driving our vision for what we believe reality capture should become. The first one is there's so many tools out there. We went from having zero construction tech and zero industry tech to this incredible explosion over the last 10 years, where now there are 50 apps that you can use for any different perspective in terms of driving your business further forward. And we're just seeing people with software fatigue. And so everyone's looking for a more unified way to do their jobs. I just want all this in one place. If we're doing an inspection, I don't want to have to train like my employees to do an inspection for outdoor stuff in this software and indoor stuff in this software and LiDAR and that software. I just want one platform to rule it all. And to double down on that as well, there are also market pressures that are pushing this direction. With the interest rates and economic uncertainty, fundraising markets have gotten tighter. And so smaller niche players, if we're building many of these small apps, they're kind of running out of funding and looking for exits. And the bigger players are using that momentum in order to pull some of those additional tools into their offerings. And so that's kind of on that unified pillar that you just flashed up there of how do we have one tool that we can have all this different data in, do all our analysis in one place, one set of integrations to build, one set of software to teach our employees on, one kind of source of truth on certain aspects of our workflows. And the market pressures are helping push that forward as well.
Yeah,
So we've
totally.
seen that over the last year. We're definitely going to see that continue over the next 12 months or so.
Totally. I just want to kind of summarize going back to your first trend, even before that was just like, hey, on the hardware side, it's like as production of things gets a lot cheaper and a lot faster, you talk about like the iPhone and basically how that drove really the aerial market, right? Then you talk about even just like the smart car market, how that's driving just like even more sensors and applications. Like that is a big trend. And I think, it's funny, some of the ones that we're going to kind of focus on here are a little bit on the software side. And they have some hardware components too, but like really when these trends are starting to be really close together in like a parallel path, and then they start to intersect themselves of like, ooh, hey, this hardware is really helping amplify some of the software side of it, and this software is really starting to help amplify some of the hardware side. Like that's what gets, I think, really exciting. Is that we are kind of at one of those intersection points of hardware and software in the reality capture space, like really starting to make its impact and really now not just saying 1+1 is 2, but 1+1 is 3. And like there's really starting to see a lot of these gains of efficiency and impact and all the things. I just wanted to kind of, but one, to your kind of second point, like what's another trend that you're kind of seeing that we're starting to kind of build out a little bit more too?
Yeah, I mean, the it's funny. We've been playing in this machine learning, artificial intelligence space for ages. I dedicated my academic career to that 15 years ago. But there's been such amazing shifts over the last 3 years in terms of these machine learning architectures. And there's been a proliferation of sharing data and sharing these models across the industry and kind of an opening up and open sourcing of what people are doing and sharing. And the culmination of that, where it really hit mainstream, was in November last year when ChatGPT launched. And it's kind of wild to think that that was only November last year. And it's
Right.
just dominated headlines. Everyone you talk to, they got a perspective. Most people that I talk to are using it on a regular basis to help just offload some of those manual tasks. And, I think we launched our first machine learning and AI product in 2018 at our DroneDeploy conference. But we've been pushing a lot on that front. That's something our latest product release has a bunch of really cool stuff in. But that is a trend we're now seeing industry wide. After ChatGPT hit main headlines, everyone's being asked by their leadership and trying to figure out internally, like, what's our AI strategy?
Yeah,
How are we
totally.
going to be deploying this? How are we going to save time? How are we going to be able to do more with the people that we have? And it's not just on the uh, efficiency side, is also enabling totally new workflows. And so that's kind of the one at the bottom there of intelligent. And that's like, I we've got it in that 1, 2, 3 order, and I can kind of go through why. But in terms of like the size of the trend, I think it's kind of 1, 3, 2. But yeah, so intelligence, everyone's just like trying to figure out what we're doing here,
Hmm.
and we've got a good plan. We've got some great content to go through on that front if you're interested to learn more,
Yeah,
and we'll
totally.
continue
I
on
think
that.
these quotes, man, we could probably put like times 10, times 20. Like we hear these all the time. And I think the thing that's really encouraging about it, but also something that, we want to continue to put content around to help support is, hey, like we hear these things. And these are things that I think you had told me kind of the other day when we were talking about this is like, hey, if you're not kind of thinking about reality capture in kind of these three buckets of like, hey, you probably need to consolidate and put them in the same place, not just for login sense, but just for even like driving actionable, value from them all being in the same place. And then, the intelligence part that you mentioned too, it's like, hey, that has absolutely exploded in the last, call it just 9 months. But this quote that we hear all the time is like, I don't need more data. I don't need more data. I need insight. Like I need actionable things that I can kind of take away from this. It's something that we hear all the time. And these reality capture tools, they've the hardware side of it has really enabled us to capture so much more data at like scales that we didn't even think were possible like 5 years ago, right? And I think that's what's really fascinating about it now is that it's not necessarily a data problem anymore, while some may argue, and I feel a little bit of the hot takes. It's more of an insights problem. It's like, what are we actually doing with all this data that we're collecting, and are we putting it through its paces to really make it useful and beneficial? But the last one that you hadn't really touched too much on, but I want you to kind of explain is this middle one. So automated, it can kind of mean a lot of things to a lot of people. I think the summary phrase that we hear a lot is like, hey, I need these processes to be like automated at scale. Like, hey, I'm not just doing this for one job. I'm not just doing this across one side. I'm not just doing this, in one region. This has to like grow and scale because people are starting to see the value. Talk about like what automated means as kind of the strategy that we want to encourage folks to think about when they think of reality capture.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about what is the most expensive part of a reality capture program, it's not the software as much as DroneDeploy would love that to be the case. It's not the hardware. It's like a little bit of capital investment to get going on that front. It's your people. It's the organizations are paying people to walk around with cameras or to stand outside and watch a drone fly itself, and those hours add up, and that's really the biggest cost driver in terms of starting and being consistent about reality capture. And so our vision of the future, and this has always been the case from day zero, is machines should be doing a lot of the work for us. And where you have a robot that's walking around on a schedule, capturing the visual, it's doing LiDAR, it's doing thermal, it's doing a whole bunch of different things at the same time and uploading all that stuff for processing. And you can count on it that every single day you're going to get this data. And it's not another job on the shoulders of somebody that's already got a full schedule. That's really where we start to see an order of magnitude of more insights unlocked. We're taking what is a kind of a boring job, and some people don't like doing it, and we're just getting robots to do that for us. And so, the hardware is there for ground-based automated capture. We've got an amazing software platform to drive that. The same is happening from the aerial side. And this one I kind of left till last to talk through because it there's a really nice flywheel effect, but it requires the cost driving down from the consumer side to make this technology accessible. When you think about like insane amounts of processing power and sensors and things required to make a Boston Dynamics spot be able to walk around by itself and not trip over and navigate constrictions and things like that, it's amazing. It's needed all those cost driving and consumerization trends to get us to this point. It also needs that intelligence, being able to do that navigation, the obstacle avoidance, collision avoidance, all that kind of stuff requires that machine learning and computer vision in order to understand the world and navigate the world and come back and do it over and over again in changing environments.
Yeah, totally. I
But
think.
what it unlocks is super exciting. And again, it kind of like feeds into why you need to have it amplified and automated again and intelligent again, is because if you've got this robot on a schedule and it's capturing data on a daily basis, why not make it hourly if you've got this kind of fixed resource that's out there? And so most of our customers tend to capture on like a weekly-ish cadence in terms of ground and aerial data. Being able to reduce that down to a daily and then reduce that down to hourly, that's just speeding your reaction time way up. You're able to catch issues long before they become problems. And at the same time, you're not generating 10, 20 times more data. You really do need to have that intelligence in order to drive those insights without having to have somebody sift through all the pictures on like an hourly basis.
Yeah, totally. You're you're teeing up very well for a future conversation we're going to have almost in about a month, just around the idea of like what is the reality going on with robotics? Like, what are the myths that are out there? What are really the things that I see a lot of marketing, but I don't see a lot of like where it's being productive. But it is being very productive, and that's not the question. It's more of just like what are the myths and misconceptions around that. So fun opportunity for a conversation if you're really interested in that here in a couple of conversations down the road. But yeah, I like what you said there too. It really is a flywheel, right? Because you want everything to live in the same spot. Like that makes the most sense. And having all this in one place, one login for a lot of different reasons that are pretty obvious. But then two, it's like, again, okay, if it's all in the same spot, how are we like coming up with really good insights around it? Like, I don't just want data and photos and all these like scan data. Like, I need insights. Like I need to actually get some value from that. But then when you really start to see, I think some of the growth and really where these programs are the most impacted is when you start to see the automation come in of where it's impacting them and how that's being used, not from a monthly down to a bi-weekly, down to a weekly, or even, multiple times a week. And that's where I think some of the automation stuff is going to get really exciting too. I want to hit on this slide really quick too, because some folks, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around what intelligence means. I know you touched on a few of them, but kind of walk us through some of these examples that we're seeing here. If you guys missed our July product release explained, go back on LinkedIn and check that out where we kind of dive into these a little bit more specifically. But yeah, Jono, kind of give us, okay, that's great. You've told us intelligence is important, but like, what does that mean for folks that are tuning in of like, but how does that impact me?
Yeah. So, ChatGPT and a lot of what's been dominating headlines is these large language models where you're essentially solving like the language problem of, can a robot understand what you're saying, what it really means, and then provide sensible responses. The area that we work in mainly is slightly different to that. We're working mainly with the computer vision side. So we're looking at pixels and we're trying to do interesting things based on what we're seeing in those pixels. And so, we're driving on intelligence in a whole bunch of different directions. I think like one area that you see, those two images on the top left there, we have this ambition of understanding every pixel in every image. And so the top left there, that is part of our work detection product that we're putting in place at the moment, where computer vision is understanding things like fire suppression system or HVAC or concrete or whatever it is. It's trying to understand and categorize and then label in every single image, this is what I'm seeing in this area. That enables a ton of really cool use cases. Like the work detection product is, we've got these locations. What has changed over this period of time? What is the work that's currently being done? But the image next to it, that's applying that same concept at an orthomosaic level. And you can then answer other things. So if you're doing an inspection task, instead of just scrolling around your map and trying to find whatever it is you're looking to inspect for, you could just ask it some questions. And you could say, I'm busy trying to understand if all my generators are in a good state. And you could just type in like, show me generators. And it can just automatically pull up all the images of generators in this map. We're using it as well for things like digital terrain models, classifying this is vegetation, this is building, this is terrain, a whole bunch of different cool use cases on that, just like understanding every pixel. And that's a pretty fundamental foundational level that you've got to have. And then you can build some really cool things on top of that. So, when you look at the things now on the right-hand side, that and below, that's using that understanding every pixel in order to do things like counting cars in a parking lot. Or below is one of these products that we've just released now, which is our concrete, we're kind of calling it like industry intelligence, but it's a concrete pre-pour AI report where we're looking for are there any incorrectly placed sleeves in concrete, and doing that in a super quick turnaround time. And so you have to have that machine intelligence to do it, because we want to be able to give results within like 2 hours of the drone taking off, because you don't want to hold up the entire pour process, but you also don't want to set your problems in concrete. And so that's like using that machine learning and understanding what is what, understanding what the plans are, and trying to see if there are any deviations there. There's like solar construction reports is the one next to it. There's a ton of really cool stuff that we can do once we've got that baseline of understanding every pixel.
Yeah, totally. I think the intelligence stuff, and believe me, we'll have some amazing conversations around that, because it's hard to cover in just even a short amount of time. But yeah, thank you for walking us through, because it's needing to kind of turn from, all right, this is awesome, but like, how does it help me, right? And so I'm curious, and we'll kind of land the plane here and wrap up, and just kind of with this as the last question is like, what would you encourage folks with to like, all right, maybe they're crawling, maybe they're walking, maybe they're running in reality capture. Like, how would you encourage folks to just like take a next step? Like, I think that's what we really kind of want to be about here is like, hey, you don't just come and listen to us. Like that's, if that's the goal of this is totally a huge miss. The goal is like, hey, take some action items away, take a next step, go and do something with this information that hopefully you either haven't heard about yet or was maybe new to you. So like, what would you say to like encourage folks of like taking their next step around reality capture?
I mean, as I said, the way I like to learn is just go out and do stuff. And then when you bump into issues, learn from there. So the easiest thing from my perspective is, we've got free trials for the DroneDeploy product, and you can go and try out all the features and functionality. I'd say if you haven't got a reality capture program stood up, just like go try it out and see what you can see. We have an incredible collection of content on our support websites. We've got the DroneDeploy Academy at academy.dronedeploy.com. We've got amazing video content and tutorials to ramp you up on all aspects of reality capture. We've got a ton of webinars, blog posts, all the great content you're putting out, Grant. So you're definitely not at a lack of content. And I'm sure other companies are doing things out there, but I'm really proud of just how much effort and energy we've put into education.
Yeah,
I'd
it's
say
often,
just got to get started.
Yeah, I've heard the quote said, and I probably stole it from someone, but it's like, simply start simply. Like, don't overthink it. Get in, get started, uh, solve the current problem that you're really trying to solve, or approach or tackle. And yeah, I would say like stay connected to folks that have either encouraged you, you've seen something. There's a couple folks on LinkedIn that, man, every time they post something, I'm like, man, that is awesome. And just, seeing the chat and the comments thread, like it's really encouraging. And again, I think a big piece of this is like, hey, we learn together and we grow together. Like that's really the hope of what I think this idea of maximizing your potential using this kind of technology is really based in, is like, hey, let's do this thing together and let's learn together as we kind of go. So, John, super fun, man. Thanks for making time to be a part of the conversation. I'm really thankful that you would, again, take time out of your day to help kind of explain a little bit about your background, really this trend. As soon as we identified this topic, I'm like, man, this is going to be amazing. Jono is going to really bring some heat, which was super helpful just to kind of see and hear. I'm going to tee you up because really what I want to help folks see is next, I know you know this gentleman that we're going to have on here, Mr. Adam Karp, but we're going to be talking about all things accuracy. So this is going to be a really fun topic for next time in 2 weeks, which will be on the 17th. Same time, same place. You'll see some info out around that. Adam, who really give us a little intro of Adam, because Jono, you've known him longer than even I have. But Adam, if you're tuning in here, we're putting you on the spot, buddy. But yeah, what kind of excites you to talk about this topic? Because again, this was something that we heard from a lot of folks. Hey, can you put out more content around this? What does this mean? How should I think about it? So give us a little fun intro for Adam for in a couple weeks.
Adam's a champion, so much so that we've got a Slack emoji internally called Adam Champ, where it's Adam holding up a trophy. But yeah, I actually hired Adam when I was running the customer support team many moons ago. And so he had the Bath of Fire introduction to DroneDeploy by answering a ton of support tickets from our customers. And that gave him a super, super deep understanding of our product. And he really loved those like deep GIS accuracy type questions. And so he would hammer me all the time, John, can you explain this? What is a coordinates reference system? What is state plane? How does that work? And so much so that he actually went off and did the whole ASPRS thing. And so, he's now above my level of understanding.
I need an acronym. I need my buzzer again. ASPRS. I don't even know what that one means.
I need to look this one.
Google it up there for me.
The American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing.
Okay.
So they're kind of like the industry standard body for the whole like photogrammetry and remote sensing side of the world. And so Adam moved out of our support team. He graduated to be one of our solutions engineers, and so works with our people that are interested in learning more about DroneDeploy and helping them set up more complicated kind of enterprise-y type trials. And then also with our new customers, how do we onboard them and get them ramped up and kind of operating at scale. So he's been doing that for a number of years. So he's just an incredible body of knowledge of what it actually takes to get out there and do stuff.
Yeah. I remember the first week that I was here, I think I went to a presentation of his and I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy he like defines, I think, the core value of simplify. He was taking just these incredibly complex topics and like breaking them down that I'm like, man, where have you been? Because I have needed a lot of the ways that he describes some things. We're going to have a ton of fun in a couple weeks. He was really the idea of trying to do something like this, of what Reality Capture Live is. He's like, dude, how do we put more stuff out? That he just released a white paper for us, which is amazing, that has gotten a lot of fun traction in some fun ways. So Adam, and I love the intro. I didn't even know that you hired him, so that's even more fun that I'll have to give him a hard time about. So maybe we'll talk about that next time. But to encourage you guys to really be a part of this conversation for next time, we have some really kind of fun, creative ways that we're going to try to get your guys' questions answered. And so thank you guys for including some of the thoughts and notes in the chat. This has been super fun. I'm looking at it down here on another screen. But one way is to really submit your question. And so we're going to try this again. This is all live. This is all like in fluid. So I'm glad that we didn't have any technical glitches today. But if you have a question, we were trying to think of a fun way to really get that question and have it be a part of kind of this stream. And so there's a little tiny URL, / Reality Capture Live, to really go and submit that question to. And honestly, I'm super pumped to be able to put these in front of Adam to really say, hey, like these are the questions that we're hearing the most from folks. So we'll put that in the link in the comments so you guys can go check that out. Or if you, again, are at your computer and you want to scan that little QR code, feel free to do that too. That'll be in 2 weeks. So that's kind of the form and feel of what we're going to be doing. These will be every 2 weeks, just for you guys to kind of know. After Adam, again, is going to be that really fun conversations about a conversation around robotics and just the reality of what's going on in that kind of space. But thank you guys for tuning in. This has been really fun. Jono, I couldn't think of a better guest for our first episode here, which is just awesome. So thanks for making this a good time, and appreciate you jumping in.
Absolute pleasure, Grant. Thanks for hosting.
Cool. And to all those that are tuning in, thank you guys for jumping in with us. We look forward to seeing you on the chat there in LinkedIn once this wraps up, and even seeing some of your notes on here too. Thanks for the time, gang, and we look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks. Take care.